By the way, if I take Andrew's thinking there, I would just tell him it's more advantageous for you to be a Christian rather than become a Muslim. Here's why. Because if you're right in Islam as a Christian, you can still get in. But if I'm right as a Christian, as a Muslim, you can't get in. So you should just be a Christian. That's the more reasonable. Andrew Tate, ladies and gentlemen. PBD is there. Now, it's very interesting. I like this dynamic. We got a Jewish fellow who, I don't think he's a believing Jew, but brought up Jewish. PBD, atheist, Christian, some of you guys know him. And then Andrew Tate, atheist, according to him, became a Christian, and then Muslim currently. This is viral. You're probably going to see a lot of folks speaking about this and reacting to it. And I watched the whole thing, and I must say, I really enjoyed this conversation. I think Andrew Tate, for the most part, it was really fun to listen to, but specifically I wanted to focus on this section of the conversation.
For me, you know, in business, I asked this question the other day. I'm so curious to get your thoughts on this. For the longest time, when I got into business, I was, a younger guy, 21. I'm like, okay, very coachable. Tell me, what do I got to do? I'm a coachable guy. What do I got to do? I'm a coachable guy, super coachable. I want to make money. I'm sick of time of being broke. My dad's at the 99 cents store. Too many heart attacks. I want to get out of this. Yep. So I'm like, hey, Patrick, basic stuff. When you're doing business and you're talking to rich people, I'm Morgan Stanley Dean Witter. Never talk religion. Never talk politics. Never talk sex. Just don't talk about those three things. I said, okay, guess what? Never talk politics, never talk religion, never talk sex. No problem. We're going to business. So what do you think about the political climate today, Patrick, David? Yeah. Oh, what do you think? Yeah. Well, I think this is, but what do you think, Patrick? I don't know, quite frankly, I think I'm trying to figure it out for myself right now, but we'll see what's going to happen, like, whatever way you're deflecting and you kind of go on your phone. Hey, what do you think about God? What is your opinion on Islam or Muslim? Yeah. Well, for me, you deflect that. Eventually you're sitting there, you're like, the people that I know at that level want to talk about those three topics. Yep. Now, sex is maybe off camera and they're kind of having fun with it, but they want to talk about politics and religion. Yep. So we, for the longest time, have been silenced, and now the ESG community, all this time they've told us to stay quiet, and they're saying what? They're talking politics, they're talking religion, and they're talking sex. Sex the way through LGBTQ, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with it? It's normal, it's normal, it's normal. No, it's not normal. Well, listen, you guys shouldn't talk about politics and sex and religion, shouldn't be doing that. And then you see this one, during COVID, one pastor, Australia, Syrian man. I don't know what his name is, Vinny. What's his name? The Syrian pastor, priest from Australia. And he was fighting all the anti-COVID guidelines, and his stuff is going viral. He's doing this. And you see these messages. Some of the people that stood up, they stood up because they feared God. Yeah. Okay? And for you, with your life, it's been interesting watching you go through your evolution of your faith. Yeah. Pre-2022, former atheist, a couple of the things you've said in the past, God isn't real because you can't prove it. Yep. Okay, kind of like that was more the Malcolm X argument, right? Yep. Bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people far too often for God to exist. Yep. I'm the center of my universe. That's pre-2020. Yep. Then gradually you start talking about Christianity, and in 2020 you made a video announcing that you were wrong about what you had said previously about God, right? Yep. Now you start saying people who are atheists are angry, bad energy people, and I don't want to be on that team anymore. And even if God is not real, the world is a better place if people do believe in God. I know God is real because there's so much evil in the world that there has to be an equal and opposite force. The devil can't exist if God does not. And if you look at the world today, it is very obvious that the devil does not exist. And I'll go to the last one here with Muslim. Quotes from you. Christians don't have a religion anymore because they tolerate everything and stand for nothing. Yeah. And by the way, I actually agree with you, the fact that they're tolerating way too much. Islam is the last religion on the planet. God is something to be feared, respected, and to prove yourself to, which means you got to earn his right. Yeah. It's hey, I want to earn your right and your respect, right? How did you go, if you don't mind talking about your own evolution? Because us as men, if you knew me at 25 years old, you probably would have liked that party with me. I was a selfish guy. I was a guy you would have thought I was, right? And we go through this phase of where the selfishness kind of comes down a little bit. You still need to be selfish because you need to be driven, but to the point where you're like, listen, man, I got to really do something. And then somehow, some way, God enters. What's been your evolution of your faith, and where are you at today?
Yeah, I think Newton's, it's third law, equal and opposite force. What you just said there is absolutely true. There has to be equal and opposite force to all the evil in the world. And the equal and opposite force to all that evil has to be God. And I've talked about this at length even with atheists, and I try and say that regardless of whether you're an atheist or not, you're thinking of God as a man in the sky, but you need to think of God as a concept as a whole. And once you do that, it's impossible to accept that he doesn't exist, right? I said to the atheists, I said, let's say there was 2 islands. You're shipwrecked, right? And there's 2 islands. Both of them are full of savages. On one island, you and your friend are shipwrecked. On one island, your friend goes and he crashes and they kill him and they eat him. And you go to another island and they want to kill you and eat you, but they don't because it's against their religion. Mm-hmm. Did God save your life? Who cares? Who doesn't even know the name of their God? But their God said, don't kill shipwrecked survivors. And now you're alive. So their God saved your life. The concept of God in and of itself saved your life. You owe God just for the concept of it, the idea of it. So even the idea of opposing evil as a whole is a belief in God. So you're either an evil person or you believe in God in some regard. And then once I understood that there had to be an equal and opposite force, I was raised Christian. I live in a Christian nation. Romania is actually, I think, the second or third most Christian country on earth. It's a very Christian country here. It's churches everywhere. They strongly believe. And that's where I began my journey. But I always had a very healthy respect for Islam because I understand that.
There's a number of things that I would like to address. Starting with this idea about God's existence being the equal and opposite force to evil. That is neither a Christian idea, nor is it a Muslim idea. The Christians do not believe, neither do Muslims, that evil and God are these dualistic kind of forces competing with each other, as if they're equal powers, and then you see who wins out. This is nowhere to be found within specifically the Christian worldview, and I can pretty confidently say this is not the case within an Islamic worldview. God is always more sovereign than any opposing force, whether it's the devil, whether it's people with their evil actions, whether it's demons, whatever it may be. God is sovereign and greater and more powerful than those things. These things aren't equal, and we need to understand that. Not saying that Andrew doesn't understand that, but the way he speaks about it, that it's equal and opposite, it's just not theologically sound, even within Islam. The other thing that is very important is he speaks about this concept of God rather than God. And I think we kind of get a hint, we get like a picture into how Andrew Tate thinks about religion and why he even quote unquote converted from Christianity to Islam. Now, my personal opinion is that he was never really a Christian. I think he liked the idea of Christianity. I think he liked the idea of God. It was pragmatically advantageous. And then maybe he found something else that has been more advantageous practically. And so therefore he says, I'm that now. I actually think his way of thinking about religion is pragmatism. It's what works best. I don't think the interest here is let's pursue truth. I don't think the interest here is I want to believe that which is true. I think what he's looking at is more which one will practically help out society, help out people, help me out in my life, help you out in your life, and then I'm going to pursue that. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but that cannot be the marker which we use to resolve conflicts regarding truth and falsehood. Because you can come up with a system that you just create that's like pragmatically really good, but it not be true. It's very, very simple. The other thing that we need to be very careful about when it comes to this subject is for us not to confuse cultural religion versus authentic religion. Both Christians and Muslims can be in agreement together when it comes to these folks or a group of folks who are culturally Christian or Muslim. And then there's another group of folks who are authentically Christian and Muslim. The reason why I mention this is because this conversation is going to go into like Christian nations, America being a Christian nation, Romania being a Christian nation. These concepts don't really exist. What I mean by that is they're not biblically taught. The Bible doesn't necessarily teach that we have a nation that is Christian, as though everything and everyone in it is Christian or something like that. We can have nations and societies, I'd prefer to think about it as societies rather than nations, that are influenced by Christianity, that is influenced by Christian thinking. That would be probably a more correct way to think about this subject from a Christian perspective, but Islam is a bit different on this. You can have a Muslim country because Islam is a socio-political religion and Christianity is not necessarily a socio-political religion.
Degree. To have a religion at all, you have to have an intolerance to a degree. Because without an intolerance, you don't have rules. You don't have laws. You don't have any, like you said, you have to earn God's respect. If you're a religion which is tolerant of everything, then you don't have to earn God's respect. You can be a bad person and do bad things. God loves me, so it's fine. Well, no, it's not, because that's not the point of the religion. So then you extrapolate that out, and I'll sit in.
To be religious means to be intolerant. Yeah, this is true. Because if you have a religion, every religion is an ideology, and every religion will teach you, say, will have do's and don'ts. Will have a general worldview, or what I would like to refer to as a filter, in which you use to see the world through. If the religious people are true to the religion, they will have a certain kind of intolerance towards certain behaviors, certain actions. By intolerance here, what we're talking about is they're not going to bend the knee and say, yeah, we think that's okay. So if you're a Christian, you should have an intolerance towards premarital sex because the Bible teaches against that. If you're a Christian, you should have an intolerance against hate. That's what we're talking about when it comes to intolerance. I think what he means here with intolerance is not tolerating people like, hey, you're not a Christian, so you can live your life however you want, but I'm going to live it different, but rather that I would have to agree with you that whatever it is that you're saying is right.
What's the primary function of a religion? And the primary function of a religion, I don't believe is the religion exists so I can live forever. I mean, that's a nice thought. But I think on a macro level, the primary objective of a religion is to restore and contain some degree of traditional value within the society.
This is an extremely important point. Again, we are getting glimpses into Andrew's mind as to how he sees religion generally. He makes very universalistic comments in this interview, by the way, that I would think Muslims would have an issue with. And he actually says that, oh, some scholar's going to look at it and I don't know Islam very well or whatever like that. He says, what's the purpose of religion? I would say the purpose of religion would be to understand God's self-revelation to us about himself. But he immediately falls back into this pragmatic way of thinking. Religion keeps some kind of traditional sort of stuff. That's not strong enough. That's very weak because traditions always change. Depending on the time period, you're going to have people holding certain views that are traditionally accepted or rejected. If liberalism becomes the new tradition and 70 years later, there's people who want to keep that sort of liberalism against a certain kind of backlash to it, the liberals are going to be the traditionalists. So they're going to be the conservatives. They're going to be the ones who want to conserve the tradition because it's been around for a long time. Where you could say the more progressives, what they would call liberals in that society, would be the individuals who would maybe tend to be more religious. To say that the purpose of religion is to keep some kind of a order going on, again, falls back into this pragmatic view of religion. This has to start and end with whether that thing is true. Because at the end of the day, if what you believe is false, then it's pointless whether it conserves religious or traditional values. Because it could be the case that whatever it is that you're trying to conserve is just bad. It's wrong. You shouldn't conserve it. I think it's pretty reasonable to sit there and think not all traditions should be respected. There are traditions that are really bad. Just because something has been traditionally the case doesn't mean it's good or right to believe. And that's not the purpose of religion. And the purpose of religion, he mentions this, is the purpose of religion like going to heaven or something like that? That's a huge aspect. You can't ignore that. That is a huge aspect of, at the very least, Christianity and Islam, that there's an eternity and then you're going to be with God for eternity. You can't just ignore that and fall back onto this weaker point, preserving traditional values. Look at the founders of these religions. Look at Jesus. Jesus comes in there and does certain things and the traditionalists don't really like it. As a matter of fact, Jesus speaks quite a bit against the traditions of the fathers. People didn't like the sorts of stuff that Jesus did because they said it was violating traditions that were handed down to them. Ever seen Fiddler on the Roof? Tradition. Jesus spoke about new wine and old wineskins, and the concept there is this newer thing that God is doing cannot be contained in these old wineskins because they're going to burst. So it's counter, to a certain extent, tradition. Not all of it, but some of it. And you could even say the same thing about Muhammad. Muhammad walks into a culture that has certain traditions, values, religion, right? Muhammad walks in there and there's polytheism happening in the Kaaba, and he gets rid of that stuff. He says, no, this is all wrong. He goes against the tradition. And I could see people sitting there saying, hey, these individuals are really messing stuff up. They're ruining our traditional values. You can't say the purpose of religion is to keep tradition. It's a really, really weak point. But what it helps me understand is why Andrew Tate views Islam the way he does and Christianity the way he does.
How do you judge, let me change the way I worded that. How do you judge the success of a religion? I don't think you can judge it by the number of people who join it.
How do you judge the success of a religion? I don't think that this is the way we should be thinking about religion. You shouldn't be thinking about religion in regards to its successes. You should be judging a religion based on its claims. You shouldn't be judging it based on whether it worked or not, whether it formed or reformed a society a certain way or not. You should truly judge it based on whether it's making true claims or false claims.
Because there's lots of people who are Catholic who don't act Catholic. They don't act in any way particularly Christian. Anyone can...
See, that's a really good point, because there's plenty of people who say they're Muslims, don't act as though they're Muslims in private, but they act like that in public because of a fear of a public backlash, especially in Islamic countries. I say that because I think he goes on to speak about kind of look at the order and tradition and values that there are in Islamic countries. That's because people don't want the backlash. And where in Western countries, people don't fear that same sort of backlash because they don't live in Christian nations, even though some of those nations are influenced and have been influenced by Christianity quite a bit.
Hey, there's something. You can walk into a strip club and everyone says they're Christian. It doesn't mean anything, right?
Correct.
So how do you judge the success of a religion? Well, and
that's the way I would say, what I would say about Andrew Tate. I would say he was saying he was Orthodox, he was saying he was a Christian, and he really wasn't. He was just saying it because he liked certain things about it. I don't think he actually looked into the details of what it is. And he admits it's the same thing when it comes to Islam. He doesn't know it very well. He hasn't looked at its claims.
I think the best way to judge the success of a religion is how successful is it at fighting evil? How successful is it at preserving the morality of a population in X parameter, in X geographical area? So when you look at it from that way...
So I think this actually commits what's called the reformer's dilemma. And this would be the case when it comes to Christianity and Islam. Both of these religions came into a certain social context where people were living in certain moral ways. What I mean by that is they had standards, people were following it, they were living a life the way they were used to. And then these individuals reformed that society. They went against the way everything was being done. If he's going to judge the success of a religion based on how well they do that job, then both of these religions, the two major religions in the world, Christianity and Islam, were deviants, and their founders were societal or cultural deviants that went against the status quo of whatever it was that was keeping the morality or keeping that kind of an order. This is a very wrong way to judge a religion. So I think this is a pretty bad standard actually to use to judge whether religion is successful. I don't even like using that kind of language, by the way, whether it's successful or not, because you can look at specific religions where maybe they weren't getting as many converts, or whether the society generally was against it. And this happened in the case of both Islam and Christianity. Society rejected it. They didn't want it. And so what we were going to say, they were unsuccessful.
You can't say that Islam isn't the most successful religion on earth. It's the most successful in regards to opposing evil. It's the most successful in regards to opposing its differing viewpoints. It's the most successful in regards to having people act within the limits and the confines of what it finds to be moral and good to God. It's the most adhered to. I
think this is an extremely naive and overgeneralized view of Islam. If he said the same comment about Christianity, I'd say the same exact thing. Those people who claim to be, you really have to get into the nitty-gritties of these societies. What is the reason? What is the driving factor of why individuals are adhering to their religions or adhering to their religions on a very surface level? Is it because they want to follow God? Is it because they love God? Is it because they were just told to do that? And this goes across the board, by the way, Christian, Muslim, doesn't matter, Hindu. Or they're actually seeking after God. They want to pursue God with everything that they have.
It seems to be the only one who will stand up and say, no, we don't care. No, that's not what the book says. No. I was raised Christian, and Muslims as a whole, we have no problems with Christians. None at all. I don't want anyone to think I'm anti-Christian, like I dislike Christians. We don't have a problem with Christians. We believe in a lot of the same things.
This is not true. This is such a Western view of this. And I don't know why people like saying stuff like this. Oh, we Muslims don't have any issues with Christians. Or even Christians saying, oh, we Christians don't have any issues with Muslims. Of course you do. We Christians think that Islam is a false religion, that it is not from God, and God did not reveal it to Muhammad. We actually view Muhammad as a false prophet. Just by that utterance I just made, a Muslim, if he wants to be true to his religion, will have issues with Christianity. By definition, it has issues with Christianity because it rejects me and Christianity, teaching that Islam and Muhammad are false. They're wrong. The other thing is, if we put it from the other side, Muslims have certain views about Jesus, and I will not tolerate, nor will I be okay with a Muslim saying, hey, we love Jesus. We respect Jesus. Look, we think he's a prophet. My response to that is, that's not enough. Because what you are doing is taking the one who said he's God and reducing him to the level of a mere human. And so therefore, you are not respecting him. I hope that Muslims who might end up watching this really understand my heart here. Those are just words to Christians. It's not the reality. You don't respect Jesus. Respecting Jesus would mean that you honor and worship him. The Jesus you're talking about, conceptually, is a completely different Jesus than the one we know to be the case from the Bible, from church history, from what Christianity teaches. And that's exactly why the Muslim has to sit there and say, oh, but the Bible's been changed. Oh, but they invented the Trinity. So that by redefining, they can say, we respect Jesus. It's you guys who aren't really doing justice to the historical person, Jesus. And I think we can actually understand this and communicate it without being jerks to one another and say, stop saying that. Stop saying you respect Jesus because you don't. It's your own version of Jesus who's not the Jesus of Christianity that you respect. And that's fine, but that's not the Jesus of the Bible. It would be the same thing. It would be really weird if I sat there and said, look, Muhammad was a false teacher. I don't think he was from God. If it's not from God and it's a false religion that's being developed, it's either coming from three sources you can say. He either created himself, it's satanic in nature, or he's just wrong. Either he's sincerely wrong, either it's satanic, or he's intentionally misleading people for whatever, fame, glory, whatever it may be. And I say that to Muslim, I say, but hang on, but I really respect Muhammad. And they're going to look at me and say, no, you don't. You either call them deceived or a liar or inspired by Satan. That doesn't sound very respectful.
We believe in Jesus. We put more respect on the name of Jesus than most Christians do. I just don't like the idea of people saying they're a Christian and saying, but because I'm a Christian, I can do whatever I want and throw all the rules away and none of it matters. Because once you have...
This is what I mean when it comes to someone being an authentic Christian and somebody not being a real Christian. This is what I mean when I talk about cultural Christianity versus real biblical Christianity. I agree with Andrew Tate. What I would say is those people aren't actually Christians. Where in the Bible do we find this teaching that, hey, I'm a believer, I'm loved by God, so I can do whatever I want? As a matter of fact, you find the complete opposite of that teaching. What you really find is where sin abounds, there abounds the grace of God even more. Does this mean we should go on sinning? No, by no means. Absolutely not. So Christianity is against this idea that Andrew Tate is saying a lot of Christians live by. They are not adhering to the proper practice and life of a Christian.
Level of tolerance, you no longer have a religion. Islam seems to be the last religion left with parameters. If you don't have parameters, you don't have a religion at all. So the closer I found myself to God, the closer I found myself to Islam. That's just how it ended.
And Andrew, speaking of fear, one could argue that Islam these days, certainly in the last 20 years with the war on terror, they've also been the most vilified.
Absolutely.
Right? So, everything that we've seen happen with extremism and everything that's going on all over the world, how are you grappling with that? You've been a Christian for years now, Islam, everything.
And you know what? That's such an interesting question, because when I was younger, especially when I was an atheist, I would sit and think, people are really doing terror attacks and doing all this crazy stuff because they're upset over a cartoon. That's so stupid. And nobody should kill anybody. Nobody should kill anybody.
Charlie Hebdo. Everything.
Nobody should kill anybody. Nobody should kill anybody. I'll make that very clear. But also, part of me is now saying, why would you want to insult the prophet for billions of people? Why would you want to do that? I'm not saying I don't want to make the argument against free speech. I'm not even saying you couldn't be allowed to. This is a sensitive subject. I'm just saying, what kind of person wakes up and thinks, I want to do that? I don't know. I just don't think that's a healthy mindset. Like when I see these Satanists, and they're especially...
Yes and no. Like some stuff needs to be explained, because what is actually... we would have to define what we mean by insult. If you're going out of your way, which is what he's talking about in regards to making fun of and insulting or whatever like that, he's saying, why would someone do that? Well, I don't know. I don't know why anybody would do that. Maybe at times there could be justifiable reasons as to why people could insult an individual, any historical individual. And they're not doing it because they're like wrong in the head or something like that. I can see somebody saying, hey, I don't respect Muhammad one iota because the guy married a 6-year-old and consummated that marriage at 9 years old. And somebody saying, why should we respect someone like that? And that being a response. And maybe even asking Andrew, hey, do you think we should respect an individual like that? And then hearing his answers from it. But generally, I would agree with him. There's no respect, maybe. There's very little respect left in our culture towards what at least other people might consider as sacred. There's a lack of shame. There's a lack of honor in our culture. And I would agree with him on these points.
And they're doing, let's keep it on Christianity. These Satanists, and they're dressing up Jesus as gay and all this stuff. Like, that's not done in any kind of good faith. There's no good reason to do that. That's done with genuinely malicious intention. And what kind of people want to do that? And then the answer by extension is, I thought America was a Christian country. So how can you have a Christian country?
So there's a couple of things that are important here. Individuals that act contrary to their religions, or using their religions to act like that, and then individuals who act in accordance to their religion and the teachings within their religions. So for example, if the actual punishment for apostasy in Islam is death, and as a Muslim, you stand up and you say, no, you shouldn't kill that person for leaving Islam and becoming a Christian. You're the weird one who's not adhering to the religion. If Jesus teaches, they're going to hate you and mock you because they hated me and mocked me. And then we see that in the world, which is something Christians actually expect the world to do. We respond to that differently. I'm not going to respond to things the way a Muslim would respond to something because it's aggressive or macho or manly or something like that. As a Christian, I'm going to live in accordance with what the Bible says. I'm not going to live my Christian life the way a Muslim would live their Islamic life. That doesn't make any sense. And it can't be like I got to be aggressive and then I got to make the religion fit into that. That's just not the way it works. We all have to change. So I got to change and adhere myself to the standards of Christianity, and Andrew Tate has to change and make himself adhere to the tenets of Islam. We all have to subjugate ourselves to the teachings of our respective religions. That's just the reality.
Where the prophets of the religion are mocked to the highest possible levels within the confines of the country, and it's promoted. Is that a Christian country? Doesn't seem like a Christian country.
Okay.
I don't think the same thing would happen with Islam in Saudi Arabia. I can't.
Yeah, it wouldn't, because it's a socio-political religion and there's laws against those things, where in countries where it's claiming they're Christian countries. I know this is difficult for people Jesus did not establish a socio-political religion. We can say Christianity influenced culture. We can say that there's individuals who politicized Christianity, liked the tenets of Christianity and brought it into their cultures, which is why in Saudi Arabia you couldn't do that. And in France you can do that. Or in America you can do that. That's the difference. If we're going to actually not talk past each other, we need to understand that that is the very basic difference.
Imagine that happening. So how can you say we're a Christian country, but everyone's mocking our God on the streets? Ha, ha, ha. It's on Netflix. Ha, ha, ha. That's not a Christian country to me. So if you're not...
The interesting thing is that the very fact of a cross is meant to be a mockery. They crucified Jesus to mock Jesus. The statement that is placed above Jesus, King of the Jews, is meant to mock him. The cross, the Bible says, is a stumbling block to the Jew, and it is foolishness to the Greek. The individuals who are doing this, regardless whether they're like influenced within a Judeo-Christian worldview, it doesn't mean they're Christians. We don't have laws the way Muslims have laws in their countries. And so you have to be very clear about the way you speak about these things.
Christian country, then where's the religion? The religion's supposed to enforce certain boundaries. You're supposed to at least show it respect, you know? And it's also kind of interesting because in Christian...
You realize that for a vast majority of history, in various places in the world, Christianity was shown no respect. Was Christianity shown respect at its inception within, say, Israel or the Roman world? No, it was mocked and persecuted. When Christianity started spreading to other parts of the world, was it just respected and accepted because, oh, it's religious, it's therefore we should just respect it? No, it was mocked. This has been the case always, at least with Christianity.
Countries, there's more respect for Islam than there is for Christianity. In a Christian country, name one. They still don't do it with the Islamic Prophet.
Why do you think that is?
It's too much smoke. It's just not worth the
This is the most honest. This is the most honest thing, I think. Not that he's not honest in the rest of the conversation, but it's a real, it's like, why is that the case? It's too much smoke, right? People are scared of the retaliation. If we want to put it in like very blunt terms as to what I think Patrick Bet-David is suggesting and what Andrew Tate is saying, is people know that if they mock Christianity, Christians are not going to respond violently. But if they do that within Islam, especially if it's a Muslim country, there is consequences to those actions. Too much smoke.
I believe, and I'm not advocating for violence on any level. I'm saying that even these degenerates who are trying to destroy people's belief in God, like we've discussed earlier, because they don't want you to have any baseline morality. If you believe in God, there are commandments, yes and no. That baseline morality prevents you being an absolute slave, so they're trying to destroy it. But even those degenerates who are trying to mock and disgrace God understand there's a point where it just backfires and, ooh, this is smoke. And they don't want the smoke. And shouldn't God be feared? I'm scared of God. It's the only thing I fear. I fear God. They can put me in jail.
Yeah, that's because you actually believe in God. So I would say, like the book of Proverbs says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Okay, so there's a reverence we ought to have towards God, and it's very simple, is that God is sovereign and the ruler of the universe, and you and I are not, so that should naturally put us in a humble state of affairs. We shouldn't think too highly of ourselves. So yeah, we should fear God. But somebody who doesn't believe in God is not going to fear God. So what's the option, right? Like, so what do you allow them generally in society? Do you allow them to live within their unbelief and lack of fear of God? Or do you come up with a socio-political situation in which if they act on it, you punish them?
God's on my side. I fear God. So God should be feared. So once again, does anybody fear the Christian God? I haven't seen anybody scared of him in a long time.
That's
and
nonsense.
It's kind of crazy.
Again, so it's one of these statements where he just makes these exaggerated, generalized statements. Like, nobody fears the Christian God. That's nonsense. Some of us have family members that came from extremely Islamic countries. And plenty of those people that said they feared Allah and claimed to be Muslims didn't care about it one iota. Not one bit in private. The only reason they put up that kind of a image is so that they wouldn't get public backlash. Patrick Bet-David knows this very well.
Very interesting. The mass migration and all these things are leftist policies, but then also Islam is the most right-wing religion on earth. It's kind of very interesting.
That's a good point.
I grew up in England, and I grew up in Luton, which is a town which is mainly Muslims. It's a huge Islamic community. And there was a bunch of English people who were complaining about there's too much immigration, we're losing our culture. And I understood their point absolutely. But these are the same people complaining about all the left-wing LGBT in schools and all these issues. And I was like, the only allies you have against this are the Muslims. They're the only allies you have in any of this. The Christians don't protest against any of this stuff. The Christians don't. There's very few Christians who will get up off their ass and complain. In fact,
in certain countries, look, when I was in the country of Georgia, okay, which is a Orthodox country, I remember going to, we were traveling somewhere, and then in front of these movie theaters, I saw a bunch of priests, Orthodox priests there. And I was like, what's going on? It's like, oh, they're protesting this pro-LGBTQ movie that just came out. And I heard that they had actually beat up people who were like in support of that. So they would look at this, and that's a lot of cultural sort of stuff is going on there, because Jesus didn't say, go and beat up people who are perverse in their thinking. Go and beat up people who want to sin. But those people are doing it because whatever the reasoning there might be. I tend to agree with him, by the way, that on some of these issues, Muslims and Christians should come together and say, we're not going to allow this. We're not going to tolerate this. But again, the difficulty becomes like how we react to that. What does it mean for us not to allow that? And those need to be explained before anybody joins hands together. Because you don't want to stand on the side of something where people act in ways that you as a Christian in good conscience cannot support and act in accordance with.
On Twitter yesterday, one of the churches was lit up in rainbow. I have nothing against gay people. I don't care. And that's actually another point. I want to make into about this thing. I think most people don't care, and I think that bothers them. Have you ever had an argument with a girl, and she's like stropping around the house, she's huffing and puffing, and you just don't give a shit? So she has to keep upping the ante till you eventually go, what's the problem? Because she tried the low-level stuff, and you didn't care. I kind of feel like this has a remnants of that. I'm gay, cool. I want to get married, fine. I want to wave my dick.
That's just not true, by the way. If we take that stuff and put it within an Islamic country, nobody's really saying like we don't care. That actually Islamic countries have legal consequences for being gay.
Whoa. It's like, whoa. I feel like they tried to annoy us, and we're like, we don't give a shit. Do whatever you want. Be a person. We don't care.
Point.
And now they're like, okay, well, we have to get to a limit where they have to react. Yeah. We want attention now. We want them to care about
What's
this.
the right move on that?
Well, that's the point. You know, it's difficult because there comes a point where you simply have to address it, and now you have to oppose it. And this is sorry to interrupt you, but this is why they're so careful and so clever with what they do. They package it all together. LGBTQ. I would argue. I don't know what Q is. Firstly, sorry, I don't know what Q is.
Questioning.
Q. All right. I would argue that G and T are very different things.
Beyond.
A gay man and someone who's chopped a dick are different things.
Completely.
So they package it all together. So now, because the spectrum of your enemy is so large, you have people who are fully this way. Mm-hmm. You have people who we accept and are normal in society. We have no problem with gay people. And they put it all together. You're an enemy of all these people. And they complicate the argument and they mix it all together. And now you're a bigot. And really, you just want your kids to be left alone. Really, you just want to leave the children alone.
Of course.
All you want to do is leave your kids alone. And then it's like, okay, I'm now raising children. I have more children than most people would believe. How do I protect my children from this insanity? God. Which God can protect my children? Allah, Islam. I'll move them to Dubai or Saudi Arabia.
That's even a weird way of thinking about like which God can protect my children. Because at that point, you're not even talking about God as an actual person or an actual being. What you're talking about is like which idea can shelter my kids from these ideas. That's a completely different conversation as to our view of God and us being in the world and the world having sin and evil in it and all sorts of things. The conversation completely changes. I think what Andrew Tate, the more I listen to him, the more I'm understanding about him, is that he likes the concept of God in Islam. It's practical, according to him.
Can I trust a Christian nation? Some of them. Romania is a Christian nation, and to a large degree, they oppose quite a lot of this stuff. But they're also NATO, and they're also EU, and they also rely on bailouts and grants and money. And on a long enough time frame, even in the 7 years I've lived here, I have watched certain attitudes change because money buys influence and power.
So Andrew, not to cut you off, how much of you converting from Christianity to Islam is actually the belief in God versus the societal pressures that are facing children? Because it seems like it's a little bit of both.
For you to believe in God, you have to respect him. How can I believe and put my life in the hands of someone I don't respect?
He got it. That's what I'm saying. It's like you're more interested in like society and the way this can impact society. It's extremely practical. If we lived in a different society where, say it was India and Hinduism is the larger religious view in India as opposed to Islam or Christianity, and that's what keeps the order, it seems to me that Andrew would say, yeah, man, I'm a Hindu. This makes sense. It's practically, pragmatically more advantageous to keeping our society the way we want to keep it.
And I'm going to respect a God which is feared.
Yeah, but it's a vertical relationship, right? It's not a horizontal. If you base it horizontally, they're going to disappoint you. If you think about, if you're going to believe, let's go believe Prophet Muhammad, his teaching, and let's go believe the Bible, NIV, and Jesus, Father, for God so loved the world that he gave his, you gave your son for me. Let's say that's true. And you're doing it based on faith. Who would do such a thing for me? What a level of sacrifice for you to do that. Who am I for you to be so worried about me? If you look at it from that angle, it's not necessarily coming from a place of fear. It's coming from a place of grace. It's coming from a place of love. It's coming from a place of,
absolutely,
a different feel. Because I do believe the part that upsets me is the fear aspect. That they're allowing others to mock your God, to mock Jesus, to mock whatever religion it is you're a part of, and you're kind of like, oh, they're just funny, man. No, it's not funny.
Yeah, nobody thinks that. By the way, nobody thinks that. Like when people make fun of Jesus, I don't sit there and go, oh, that's funny. I don't laugh with them. Right? It's not funny because that's personal. It's the way we respond to these things, and it's the way we're taught to respond to these things as Christians. We have to go back and look at what Jesus taught on the subject. We have to go back and look at what Muhammad taught on the subject and act in accordance to whatever our religion said.
Casey has that one line where he says, don't tell me why what the guy said about me. Tell me why he was so comfortable saying it to you.
100%.
You tell me why he said it comfortable to you. So I think that's the part about faith. I understand when you're saying the fear on the respect side. So that's the part where fear is needed. I totally agree.
Yeah.
But the part where you were making a point about LGBTQ, you're like, I don't even know what Q stands for, is questioning. And then you're like, well, gay, okay, cool. Yeah. Trans, listen, man, spectrum. And he said if we were to say which religion's the far right, it's going to be Muslim. Totally get it. They're on the far right. Christian today is kind of going center left today. Like they're kind of being soft right now.
No, Christians are. So again, I would say, I'll just correct Patrick here. Christians or people who claim Christians or our society that has been for a large period of time influenced by Christianity is going that way. The Bible hasn't changed. The Bible makes claims. It would be the same thing. And by the way, there are pro-LGBTQ imams who are talking about tolerance and acceptance and all that stuff. What people will say, and rightly so, the Muslims will say these guys are wrong. This is not accordance to what our religion is teaching. In the same way, the Christian can look at it and say, oh, sit down and listen to some of these pro-LGBTQ kind of folks. They refer to God as a mother. They don't think the Bible is the word of God. They don't think Jesus is God. They don't accept the most basic tenets of Christianity. They're not Christians. How much does someone have to give up in order for us to say you're not a Christian, regardless of what they're saying about themselves? That's generally the way these individuals are. They give up quite a bit, and then they're like, but we still want to be Christians. You can't. That's not the way it works. Come up with your own religion.
I'm going to take my kids to, Dubai, and I'm going to take my kids to Saudi Arabia. Why? Because I'm defending against some of these immoral philosophies that they have. Yep. I don't want to go there. I actually understand that argument.
Yeah, and I truly, and I want to make one more point. I do believe there is one God, and I believe there's many different paths to God. And I'm not a religious scholar, and I'm not an expert on Islam.
That's right.
I'm doing my best, and I'm reading the Quran as often as I can. And it does say that Christians on the day of reckoning will see how close they were to the truth. And we are allies. We are not enemies in any regard, Christians and Muslims. And I do believe that the idea of Christians and Muslims shaking hands and saying, let's put an end to a lot of this garbage would be fantastic. I'm not anti-Christian in any regard. I just found myself, as I became more and more religious, seeking and looking for a faith which not only I could be proud of, but a faith which was guiding in regards to, I don't know what a Christian would answer to certain questions nowadays. What does a Christian answer to, I'm a transsexual and I want to show your kids my genitals. What's a Christian? Well, a Christian's supposed to say no, do they?
Yes.
I know what my Muslim friends would say.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And we're called bigots and we're called X, Y, and Z. We do. That's not even a question that should be asked. Those who don't, regardless of what they say, are either not Christians or they're not living the way a Christian ought to live. By the way, if I take Andrew's thinking there, I would just tell him it's more advantageous for you to be a Christian rather than become a Muslim. Here's why. Because if you're right in Islam as a Christian, you can still get in. But if I'm right as a Christian, as a Muslim, you can't get in. So you should just be a Christian. That's the more reasonable scenario and the reasonable position to take if he's right about what he's saying. Now, a lot of Muslims will say, no, he's wrong. Christians aren't getting in. It's blasphemy to worship a human being as God. So they'll call him out on this.
I don't know. If you're a Christian, I don't know how you're supposed to act. I don't know what you're supposed to adopt. I don't get it anymore.
Read the Bible.
The true believer. The true believer. Yeah. But how many are true believers? I don't know. I see all over Twitter, all these churches are losing their mind.
Yeah, because they're not being true to the Bible. And maybe in 5 years' time, you might see a lot of mosques doing that. So it's not some kind of like you got an issue against Christianity or Christianity's changed. It's individuals who are doing these things that are not adhering to their own religions.
It seems very complicated. Islam seems very, very simple. You know what's right, you know what's wrong.
Maybe that's the point. Maybe that it is too complicated and Islam is a bit more simplistic in regards to its rules and how you can follow it and all that. So that's my reaction to Andrew Tate speaking about religion with the very great Patrick Bet David. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope my commentary on this subject has brought some kind of clarity, whether you're a Christian, atheist, or a Muslim.